So let's see how some of the theory of Arks of Omen comes together in practice with a look at 5 top tournament lists with 40k's brand new system of rules. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today I thought it would be interesting just to take a look at a selection of Warhammer 40k army lists that are doing quite well with this whole new Arks of Omen thing. The game's rules have changed quite a bit. I feel like there's going to be a period of experimentation where people are trying things out before people zero in on some of the strongest options for each faction, and it's going to be interesting to see what people do. With that in mind, I thought we'd just take a look at a selection of lists from an absolutely massive tournament that's going on at time of recording, a big one called Uprising Adelaide in Australia, with over 200 people in attendance. I think at time of recording this video the winners are yet to be determined, but they've played a good 6 or 7 rounds now, and a fair few lists have won 6 victories, or say 5 victories and a loss. I thought we'd just take a look at a few of the top ones out of that set, and what choices the players are taking. I'll try and post a pinned update comment down below when we actually have the results of the tournaments, but to be honest, regardless of whoever winds up winning, these lists and players have kind of already proven themselves, all of them scary threats at the top of the 40k meta. Let's jump into it and take a look at 5 of the best. First up, we've got an Adeptus Custodes list run by Leon Hackett. This one was one of the ones that made the top cut. Interestingly, it's a rather different style of Custodes to what a lot of people have been playing. Rather than say Emperor's Chosen or Emissaries Imperators or anything, this one's a Solar Watch list, a slightly lesser played shield host, where their main ability is an extra +1 to advance and charges, plus they're able to fall back and charge once they get stuck in. Handy enough for getting to grips with the enemy a little bit further, and perhaps one of the other main draws of them is using their Warlord trait Sally Forth. That one allows you to advance and charge with 1 friendly infantry next to your Warlord. It also gets to double up on one of the Callista's Qatar bonuses, potentially allowing them a little bit extra movement with some boosted advance rolls, or shooting as if stationary even if they advance. They can definitely move quickly for infantry, these guys. The detachment is an Arks of Omen detachment with the elites focus, and this one does seem to be making the most of just dropping all troops on the list whatsoever, particularly as the Custodians just gained objectives secured on their Terminators and Wardens. Literally 1,000 points out of the list are dedicated to 2 spectacularly enormous Warden blobs with Guardian Spears, massive threats down the middle of the table, and compared with the troops Custodes, the Wardens do have their advantages. They get the Feel No Pain type save, and also an extra attack in close combat. The big units would certainly be good for targets of those powerful Custodes stratagems that they can now use several times per game, things like turning off enemy rerolls, or being able to pick up other bonuses from different martial Qatars when they need them most. I suspect that they'll be well supported by the characters. Otherwise, for the squads, there's 1 unit of 3 Alaris Custodians with the axes and the grenade launchers, and then 2 individual Alaris Custodians with the axes. I guess they could be interesting little deep strike obsec threats. They might be usable enough to try and pick up behind enemy lines potentially as well. Leading the host, there's Trajan Valoris with his Warlord traits, a pretty easy include in most Custodes armies, and he will be able to give some big buffs out to those Wardens. A fast-moving Dawn Eagle Jetbike Captain with Hurricane Bolter and Tip of the Spear, the one that allows you to reroll 1s to hit and wound. Interestingly enough, the unique Knight Centura Alea, kind of a fun choice that one. I feel like more people tend to run the generic Knight Centura choices. I feel like Alea doesn't add perhaps an enormous amount for the extra 25 points. And then finally a fairly focal buffing character in a Vexillus Praetor with the Magnifica banner. That's the one that gives you -1 to hit, probably on those massive blobs of Wardens. He takes Sally Forth, the one that allows you to advance and charge with a unit. It means that your Wardens could be going super fast over the board. I think in theory they've got around about an 18-inch charge threat range, never mind any command point rerolls or things. He's also got the Castellan's Mark as well, the one that allows you to redeploy units. Again, pretty massively powerful when you've got so many big units in a squad. Finally, rounding out the list, there's 5 Witch Seekers with the Flamer Sisters in the Anathema Psychana Rhino. Could be a bit of psychic deterrence if you need it, I guess. Their Flamers are perhaps a little bit more interesting than they were before, with AP -1 not being countered by Armour of Contempt, and their pre-game move could allow them to get to midfield objectives to do things like actions early. Overall, I must admit those big blocks of Wardens do look pretty intimidating. Feel No Pain, a -1 to hit, and potentially some big stratagem plays like Transhuman or turning off all rerolls should make them very hard to take down as they cross the board. Really cool to see such a different Custodes list compared with quite a lot of ones that we've seen recently. Moving on here, we've got some Dark Angels, this one run by Damien Ridgewell, and again made the top cut. Again, the Arks of Omen is an elites focused detachment, so extra elite slots, plus using the heroic support stratagem to unlock Samael plus Lazarus. This one feels like a bit of a dual winning approach to Dark Angels, which is kind of cool to see. A big block of Deathwing Terminators, 2 units of 10 of them supported by Samael, with 3 units of attack bikes plus a Talon Master. The Dark Angels do bring some troops along as well. 2 units of 5 infiltrators with the Helix gauntlets could be deployed up front and deny some deep strike and things. They definitely feel a lot more usable, seeing as they went down more than most of the other Space Marine troops, and they are fairly tanky as well, ignoring that first failed save each turn. I guess they could make use of that sticky objective Space Marines rule now. They could take an objective and move on if it made sense. For the Deathwing contingent, there's actually 22 Terminators. There's a small command squad with just 2 Thunderhammer and Storm Shield Terminators, plus a Watcher in the Dark. And then the main event on the Terminator units with 2 big blocks of 10 of them, all with Thunderhammer and Storm Shield. Really excellent value for 33 points per model, as we've talked about in a previous video. And the Dark Angels Terminators get even better than that, being able to get a Cyclone missile launcher mixed in within the squad, so they're not even a wasted space in terms of shooting either. They also take a Watcher in the Dark for a single Psychic Denial. Those Terminators just look immensely threatening. A 2+ save with a +1 and a 4+ invul with a Storm Shield, even better in cover, and I suspect likely supported by Lazarus for his 5+ save against mortal wounds, which cuts down on one of the best ways to kill them, as they all have transhuman physiology as well. Buffing the Terminators as well, it also looks like there's a Deathwing Chapter Ancient with Thunderhammer and Storm Shield. He takes the Watched Warlord trait, an automatic Psychic Denial once per game, as well as Rites of War to give those big Terminator blocks objective secured, and a relic listed which I suspect is going to be the Penitent of Remembrance, the one that allows you a -1 damage on the Terminator squads, making them yet more durable. The Chapter Ancient buff also gives him the option of making 1 unit within 6 inches a +1 to hit in combat. I guess that never hurts with all those Thunderhammers. Lastly, in terms of character support, I suspect more buffing the Deathwing than the Ravenwing is the Ravenwing Apothecary. He gives out his 6+ Feel No Pain, healing, and has Selfless Healer to resurrect one from the dead each turn, potentially going closer to the enemy for shorter charges. Finally, perhaps for the Ravenwing contingent proper, we've got a Talonmaster with the Arbiter's Gaze relic, the one that allows you to always hit on a 2+ regardless of modifiers. And now Dark Angels have the option to sit in Devastator Doctrine all game long if they want to. Could be particularly interesting getting AP -2 on that scary amount of Talonmaster volume fire. Samiel's here as well, could give you some full rerolls to hit with the attack bikes. The attack bike units might particularly like that if they want to be advancing around the board and getting the 4+ invul save for the Ravenwing Jink. Reroll all hits certainly would be appreciated with that. Finally, as mentioned, there's 3 units of 3 attack bikes with the multi-melters, a lot more efficient now they're just 50 points per model rather than 60, and I guess it's pretty intimidating seeing as they were already quite good. Dark Angels Ravenwing is a really nice way to run them as well. They have their Ravenwing Devastator Doctrine, where they get an extra 3-inch move, plus can advance and shoot their heavy weapons as if assault, so shouldn't have too much difficulty drawing a bead on the things that they need to. Overall pretty terrifying, some really solid damage dealing with all those multi-melter shots, and then an absolutely indomitable phalanx of Terminators moving up the board and taking the objectives with their objectives secured, and ready to beat down anything that they get their hands on in close combat. Seems like they're an army that would do very well with the new Space Marines Oaths of Moment one, and just dominate the centre of the board. Moving on, we've got an Adeptus Mechanicus list, this one by Ben Warrior. It just missed out on the top cut, though not by a whole load. It was a 200-person tournament, and this one was in the second cut of 4 people. I felt like I saw a lot of AdMech discussion saying that Riser might well be a bit more of a thing, and it does seem to have been working perhaps better than it has been before. For those not familiar with them, Riser basically feels like the Blood Angels of the Adeptus Mechanicus. They get a +1 to charge rolls, and in the first round of combat they get a +1 to their attack's wound roll in melee, basically meaning that every combat unit is vastly more efficient than normal. The list is an Arks of Omen Elites focus once more, and makes pretty heavy use of most of the improved AdMech choices, particularly the Cataphron Servitors. Perhaps for the central damage dealers of the list, there's a whole solid core of Cataphron Breachers, 3 units in total with hydraulic claws that are fairly scary in melee in themselves, damage 3, 1 anti-tank torsion weapon, and 2 of the heavy arc rifles that are quite general purpose. One of the units is a bit bigger with a unit of 5 with an extra torsion cannon as well. There's then some Cataphron Destroyers on the board as well, with their Plasma Culverins. Perhaps not too surprised to see one of those there, with Riser's Plasma Specialists on the go. They get a 2 command point 1 where they can make their plasma weapons +1 damage, which is pretty nice. I feel like the plasma itself has got a whole load better. It dropped in cost, plus you can now get core rerolls and things like the Tech Priest Dominus. Speaking of which, it looks like these Cataphron Servitors are boosted by a whole cadre of Tech Priests. There's 2 Tech Priest Dominuses with the Macro Stubbers and Volkite Blasters. They give you some rerolls, and 2 Techno Archaeologists that allow you to do some actions while shooting, and also deny a bit of deep strike if it matters. These guys have gone really big on the Holy Orders, the Archaeologists taking the Logi and the Genitors ones. All the Holy Orders allow you some slightly discounted stratagems when you need them, and with big chunky units like Cataphrons I feel like they've got plenty of options, Logi can ignore AP-1 or AP-2, or potentially trade in to ignore cover if that's not important. Genitals is a pretty solid shooting buff, where unmodified 6s to hit automatically wound the target. That seems like it to be fairly savage with those plasma weapons. And one of the Dominus Tech Priests takes Artisans. That allows you an ability to fall back and shoot if you need it in addition. So I feel like that one might be a pretty reasonable one to move forward into the advanced part, and it allows you a +1 strength buff to your guns if that is going to be important. Finally, for the Tech Priest Dominuses, they've got some pretty good combat buffs going on. One gets Supervisory Radiance for reroll hit rolls in melee. That seems like it'd be quite good on either the Cataphrons or the Ruststalkers, to be honest. And it would fit with Ruststalkers jumping out of transports as well, as you get to trigger this in the fight phase, not the command phase. He's also got the Raiment of the Technomartyr for a bit more defense, plus also to allow one unit to ignore modifiers to their ballistic skill. Finally, the last Tech Priest Dominus has Citation and Savagery, the Riser Warlord trait. That one allows you to improve AP by -1 in the fight phase. Again, pretty solid on either the Cataphrons or the Ruststalkers. And he gets the Omniscient Mask as well to allow Scutari core units within 6 inches to get exploding 6s to hit in melee. I guess that means he's probably going with the Ruststalkers as opposed to with the Cataphrons. Speaking of which, backing up the Cataphron core, there's a whole bunch of Ruststalkers in transports, 3 units of 10 of them with the Transionic Blades, and one takes the Temprocopia. Ruststalkers were perhaps one of the most effective AdMech units in the first place. They're absolutely amazing with Riser, with the +1 to wound and the huge amount of volume attacks, plus they also went down in cost as well, so you can afford to take quite a lot of them. Looks like 2 of them will be jumping out of the even cheaper Scorpius Doom Riders at just 85 points now. Really very efficient with the amount of stubber shots they get as well. And one of them will be hiding in a Terrax pattern termite drill with some heavy flamers. I'd guess that'd probably be using its deep strike rules and then get the unit out. I guess they'd always have the chance of an 8-inch charge with Riser that you could re-roll. Finally, to hold down midfield objectives, there's 2 units of 5 infiltrators with power sword and stub carbine. In Riser though, these guys are pretty serious melee threats in their own right. Could be fairly scary for first turn charges against certain enemy units that maybe aren't massively awesome in combat. Overall, really quite a cool AdMech list, I think. Really cool to see a melee version of AdMech on the go, particularly one that's so character transport and Cataphron heavy. Moving on, we've got a Tau Empire list. This one an interesting Borkhan list by Hayden Waldog, who alongside another Tau player managed to make it into the top cut. Seems like the Arks of Omen nerf haven't done too badly for the Tau players, though it maybe does look like it's affected unit makeup a little bit. There are 0 crisis suits in this list. The Sept uses Borkhan, which is an interesting thing in itself. The vast majority of Tau competitive lists that I've seen tend to either build around Tau Sept or Farsight enclaves. Borkhan are the ones that get an extra 4 inches to the range of all their weapons, particularly nice for close range stuff. Enemy weapons that are strength 7 or less counters 1 lower strength against vehicles and battlesuits, and they also have that rather scary 2 command point experimental weaponry stratagem, which allows you to punch through invuls with a single shooting attack. I'd guess that's probably going to be best on one of the Riptide's Ion Accelerator if you need it, though a couple of Tau Hammerheads with railguns do already have that niche at least fairly well covered already. This time the Arks of Omen detachment is a heavy support focus one, with a heroic support command point spent for an extra commander. First up, and kind of predictably, there are 2 Tau commanders here. One's a Cold Star one with the 2 good burst cannons, the prototype one and the high output one, 2 flamers, a target lock, and the Borkhan Warlord trait Seeker of Perfection, improving armor penetration of all the weapons by 1, and an unmodified wound roll of 6 deals an extra mortal wound against the target. You are quite likely to max that cap with the amount of shots coming out of this guy. He's backed up by a rather expensive Enforcer commander, going extremely heavy on the cyclic ion blasters here with 3 of them, really quite pricey when they have the increasing cost, plus the prototype thermoneutronic projector flamethrower, and all of which benefiting from the precision of the Hunter Warlord trait, allowing you full rerolls to hit and wound with all of that damage to volume fire. He takes the durability relic, the Begel Hunter's plate, the one that gives you an extra +1 to saving throws, not bad when you get a 2+ to start with, plus a 5+ feel no pain type save as well. He also has a marker drone too, so can pick out a few marker lights to support the other units. Then there's an ethereal with a hover drone, just sucking up the extra small, boosting cost. He's exemplar of Cao Yon, so can allow you to put some units in strategic reserve or redeploy them if you need. And he takes the Hungball stave that allows you a 2+ cast on 2 invocations, the command point farming 1, and interestingly enough the Storm of Fire 1 that allows you to action and shoot. I guess that's probably helping some of the units do things like those aerospace targeting relays or perhaps raising banners. I guess you could potentially do that tag teaming with the commanders. Then out of the squads there's 2 units of 10 Breachers mounted in Devilfish. I was wondering if a few more lists might be starting to run those again, seeing as the very popular Sun Sharks just caught a big nerf by having to start off the board, and they're also joined by a unit of 10 Pathfinders as well, who also join in another Devilfish. They've got 3 rail rifles for some fairly serious anti-tank power, and also provide a whole ton of marker lights to the other units if they can survive. I guess they might be able to make use of the Pathfinder move stratagem to pop up, mark things, and then hide away. They also have all 3 of their unique Pathfinder drones. Then there's 2 units of 4 Kroot Hounds, nice and cheap screening expendable chaff with a pre-game move. The 3 Devilfish with gun drones that you can have the breaches in. You could potentially be getting things out of them after they've moved. And then there's just 4 really big gun units to do a fair bit of the heavy lifting for the list. 2 Hammerheads with railgun, burst cannons, and 2 Seeker missiles each. And then 2 Riptides with the big ion accelerators, a pair of plasma rifles, multi-tracker, target lock, and velocity trackers, one of which takes a shield and missile drone. Overall, it's quite cool to see Tau doing well with a set that isn't either Farsight or Tau Sept. Having no crisis suits at all I think is interesting enough, and it's quite cool to see the big Fish of Fury style with 3 different Devilfish in one army. Finally, I was wondering how Chaos Demons might be adapting to the new rule set, and this one's a list by Matt Morrisoli, who again was in the second bracket I believe for the Uprising Adelaide. This detachment's an elites focus one, and is led by a couple of choices that are kind of similar to ones many were running before. The Bloodthirster with the Great Axe, the Argath Relic for a hideous amount of combat damage, plus the Indomitable Onslaught special rule, the one that stops him losing more than 8 wounds a turn. There's then the Warlord Lord of Change, who takes Bolt of Change and Infernal Gateways for some massive hitting mortal wound stuff, plus Boon of Change as well, which I'm kind of interested as to what the thinking was there. I'm not sure if he's just fishing for the extra toughness to make him toughness 8 rather than toughness 7, and even harder to take out with that 4+ demon invul save at range. It's kind of interesting that even with the completely new codex and new rules for both things, the combo of Incorporeal Form and Impossible Robe seems very alive and well. The Impossible Robe now mitigating a single attack each phase, and the Incorporeal Form meaning that he's -1 to wound. He is just very hard to take out, particularly with guns. Finally, he's got the exalted ability Master Mutator, the one where you've got more chance to deal extra damage with mortal wounds, which could potentially be some very big splash damage with the Infernal Gateway. Finally, for the HQs, there's a Transweaver with Hysterical Frenzy, the Herald of Slanesh, who's actually not too terrible in combat now. Hysterical Frenzy is the psychic power that gives you +1 to your attacks and exploding 6s to hit, both of which are really quite nice buffs for Demonettes or Fiends. Plus, you can also improve AP by 1 for a unit, and reroll wound rolls of 1 for nearby units too, so an awful lot of melee buffs all stacked together for 70 points. I guess it could be an interesting enough model for doing psychic secondaries if they're necessary as well, either rituals or mental interrogation or something. Then moving on to the squads, the demons still seem to be going pretty heavy on troops. Kind of interesting that this list would have fit just as happily inside a battalion, so I guess not really much gained from the extra flexibility from Arks of Omen. In the troop slot there's 10 Bloodletters, pretty nice for just jumping out of the warp and murdering something. 2 units of 10 Demonettes, which alongside the Fiends I would guess would start on the board. They've got the movement to get from cover to cover and make some very long charges, probably supported by that Transweaver. There's a unit of 10 Horrors which got a fair bit cheaper in the new rules. They are quite an annoying and hard to kill troops unit and will be quite irritating to shift off say a backfield objective. A unit of 3 Nurglings for some forward deploy goodness. Still 2 units of 5 Flamers, despite the rather big nerf that they got to their shooting, it still seems they're doing fine. 2 units of 3 Fiends of Slanesh. I didn't think that they were unusable before, and now they've dropped to 30 points, they're genuinely quite threatening. 4 attacks with AP -2 and damage 2, plus a barbed tail with damage 3, and a very fast and threatening units with a 14-inch move. Finally, I'm perhaps not too surprised to see 3 units of 5 Fleshhounds here. They got dropped in points quite aggressively, down to 15 points each, all around efficient now, fairly solidly tougher than the Bloodletters or the Demonettes, much faster, and nice enough general purpose melee with damage 2 on the charge. They also can be handy enough for turning off some psychic powers as well. A 3+ to deny with contempt for sorcery is pretty nice if they're within 12 inches. Overall seems pretty solid. I felt like the demons were an interesting place, having a lot of points buffs, but a few key options nerfed, and also the loss of their warp storm abilities for god-specific detachments. Still seems like they're capable of doing fairly well in tournaments though. So anyway, let me know what you think of the list down in the comments below, and as always feel free to give me any insights as to how these ones were played. I'm sure I'll be missing all manner of things, seeing as I'm not the one who made or ran them. I'm sure we'll talk some more army lists in the future. It's going to be interesting to see what some factions put together with all the new rules. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new stuff just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention as well that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that links down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what comes next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.